Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. It's another story time and today we're going to be talking about Clipvia. So Clipvia was a clip studio that I joined in January 2014 because I had been booted from my last studio for sticking up for people. If you guys want to see that story time, it was just a couple weeks ago, so you should definitely check it out. Now, I wanted to go and find somewhere that was incredibly simple to use because my customers had told me that when they wanted to move, they didn't want to go somewhere like Clips for Sale because it was a little too intimidating how much there is on their front page. So when I was doing my research and I saw a lot of the performers that I knew were using Clipvia more as a secondary studio and kind of saw how simple it was set up, I was like, this seems pretty cool. I mean, their front page was literally just the newest clips, the top clips, and then the names of all the top studios. It was really simply set up, and in that way it was kind of basic, and you could tell that they didn't have anybody on that kind of end working on it. So the big attractor for this site in the beginning was the fact that they offered an 80% payout. Now, most sites offer a 60-65, and that's kind of the industry standard. So the fact that they were so high above the industry standard was pretty attractive for a lot of people. But looking back, having it be an 80% payout is a big dick move, and that cuts out a lot of the money that the site would keep for their own costs. So that was an omen, if nothing else. Now, despite this, they still kept that big dick energy about the fact that they were paying out so much more than others by having a chart on the model dashboard that listed out what you had made for that pay period, what you would be getting for Clips for Sale if you would work for them, and what you would be getting for I Want Clips, which is rude, and calling them out by name is just unprofessional, but at the time it just seemed like, wow, that's really crazy that I'm making so much more. I feel so awesome. I feel like a good business person. I feel like I'm making smart business choices. Now, despite this big dick energy, in the beginning, the site ran like shit. I mean, you were supposed to get payouts about the 3rd of the month. You would get the payout between the 8th and the 10th, and that's if you were a higher earner. Additionally, the only person that seemed to be working for staff at this time was the owner and creator, a guy named Jimmy. And he was not good with staff support whatsoever, so unless you were sending an email about something that he could fix very easily, you wouldn't hear anything back, or you wouldn't for a long time. Now, for the first several months that I worked with them, despite the fact that the payouts were late, there wasn't a super big issue. It was a pretty open, useful site to use at the time. It just wasn't run super well. Despite this, though, people were still joining and bringing money into the company, so the company started having upward growth as 2014 went on. You know how in Always Sunny, when they reached their tipping point, I think around late 2014 and early 2015 is where they started to reach their tipping point and just weren't doing well for themselves. I mean, they were making kind of all the wrong choices instead of continuing to build up, you know? Like, out of nowhere, there were, like, a lot more staff hired, including someone named Cody, who was very helpful and definitely does not deserve the shit end of the stick in this story whatsoever. They started making merchandise, like Clipvia t-shirts and stuff like that. They started doing little monetary contests and top, like, earner contests and stuff like that. Which, of course, if you've seen any other clip site nowadays, you know that's not uncommon. But for a site that was just hitting its stride and barely paying people out on time by this point, it really wasn't a good decision for them to make. Despite this, though, at this time, at the peak performance of the site, people were getting paid just about on time. People were getting a somewhat good response from staff. And although there were a lot of studios that got away with making, like, offensive content because they would mix it in with arguable offensive content. Like, for example, if they had a very racially insensitive video, they would bury it with 6 religiously insensitive videos and say, oh, well, it's against Christianity, so, like, we're doing all of this different stuff and we're just offensive to everybody and you have to deal with it. And this was 2015, so call-out culture wasn't quite so big at the time. So it got brushed under the rug sometimes. In late winter of 2015 is when everyone started to say that their payouts were just not coming. I was a top earner. All of the other top earners, they seemed to be getting their payouts still, and people were getting their payouts eventually. It was just weeks and weeks and weeks late. It was about as bad as it was in the beginning of the site when nobody was there. So it was not good. It was super not great, but people weren't willing to leave, and it was obvious that they were paying the top performers just to have this idea that the site was still functioning somewhat normally, and there were just a few hiccups here and there. However, in May of 2015, payouts screeched to a total halt. None of the top earners were getting paid. Nobody was hearing anything from staff, and support email just shut down. Nobody was hearing anything. I mean, people were earning like chunks of money at a time. So like thousands of dollars were just missing for singular performers. Just one. It was awful. I mean, tons of people were talking about how they couldn't pay their bills. I mean, there were performers that were parents, that were going to school, that were supporting themselves, me included. I mean, my ex and I were living in an apartment at the time that we suddenly couldn't afford. So there was never really a legally confirmed reason about why everything just stopped so suddenly. But Clipvia came out and said it was because they had made so much in one pay period that the bank froze their funds and they were going to need tons more money to get the funds unfrozen. Of course, I didn't believe this. A lot of other people didn't believe this. There were some theories going around that they were just fucking around with the money too much and suddenly didn't have any to pay everybody. I don't know. That seems like a lot of money to lose out of nowhere. I really don't know. I mean, we have no idea, but that's what they said. They said that the funds were locked up in the bank and that they were looking for investors so they could get the funds unlocked or at least start paying people. So a little bit later during that summer in 2015, I removed all of my clips from my studio and stopped advertising it altogether. ManyVids was in its young years at the time, so I joined them. Amateur porn came not too long afterwards. I can't express how privileged I was, guys, to have the backups that I even had to be able to survive long enough to quit the studio and move over. Because as far as I remember, a lot of people eventually just faded into the background and stopped sex work. But that's the end of my part of the story. However, Clipvia's story does not end here. By September of 2015, a good percentage of their models had not been paid. Barely anybody had gotten replies to emails. Clipvia posts that they are not answering emails because they're getting death threats. How unprofessional. I mean, I'm sure a lot of businesses get death threats, Clipvia, but you know what? I'm sure they just ignore those and continue to do their damn jobs. In October of 2015, they announced that they had not been answering emails because our staff email accidentally got deleted and all of the support requests, we just couldn't get to them. Yeah, you just accidentally deleted a whole support email?
Yeah, okay.
It was just bullshit. Nobody wanted to believe it, and that was a big disrespect enough. But in the same wind of the same month, they announced that they're going to go down to the industry standard of 65%, which, yes, was a good idea months ago when you still had loyal models that wanted to work for you. You've dug that hole too deep. You might as well get in the casket and lay the fuck down. Now, their tone had changed by this point to, we're not trying to get investors to unlock all this money in this bank. We're just trying to get investors to try to get everybody paid. Most of the time they would say, oh yeah, we for sure got an investor this time, and then it would fall through and they would have to find something else, and it was just bullshit. Things stayed this way with tiny, itty-bitty trickles of models getting paid and, flocking away from the site until January 2016, where they announced the mother of asshole moves. They had a brand new deal where if you made sales with them, every sale would be matched up with the money they owe you. Like, are you kidding me? Like, no, I'm not earning the money you already owe me, you know? Like, that is absolutely asinine. That's fucking ridiculous. Like, they should have been ashamed for even, like, thinking that was a good idea. Like, the drama began when I Want Clips offered a deal to Clipvia that would essentially erase all of their debts and pay all back model pay. I Want Clips would take over Clipvia and they would save it, essentially. Clipvia declined and stated that this was a publicity stunt by I Want Clips and they had no interest to help. What? So, in return, I Want Clips came out and said that Clipvia still owed models $50,000 in back pay. That's just... And there were models coming out that were saying, like, oh yeah, after 2 years I've finally been paid. And, like, if they're getting paid and then they're still that much owed, like, that's insane. And finally, to add the final shitty thing that was done, in their 2016 tax papers and their 1099s, the money that was not paid to these models who were still not paid by this time was still being counted towards their taxes. Which, let's think about this with common sense here. The customer puts their money in the hands of the site. They take their percentage, which is their tax responsibility, give us our 60%, which is our tax responsibility. And until they give it to us, that 60% is still their responsibility. So for them to hold models liable for money that they are responsible for, that they lost, is tax fraud. What's so crazy is that's just the end of this. There was a whole nother year where nothing happened. They closed their registration at some point, but the site still functioned normal for models until January of 2017, an entire year after all of this, when they finally took Clipvia down. And to this day, in 2019, there are still models who are owed thousands of dollars. There is no happy ending to this story other than the fact that Clipvia doesn't exist anymore, so they can't scam anybody again. So that's pretty much the end of the story. Everybody moved over to, like, ManyVids or amateur porn or anywhere else, or made their own sites, or had to make a complete site change. There were tons of people that probably had to make big freaking changes because of what a bunch of, like, people behind the scenes that didn't really consider what they were doing had done to them. So that pretty much wraps up this video, and I still can't believe all of that happened. And it's just so simple to put back in your past and not think about it, but thinking about it now, I still just can't believe how crazy that was. So, did you guys like this video? Did you not like it? Did you think it was interesting? Tweet at me, let me know, send me a curious cat, whatever. Thank you guys so much for watching. I put a poll out recently, and you guys said you wanted more sex worker story time, so I really hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys said you also wanted some more Q&As and makeup videos, so I'll keep that in mind, and I will have that out for you guys soon. Keep an eye out. I'm hoping for a better content release schedule. Thank you guys so much for watching. Check out my other videos, subscribe, and turn on the notifications if you want to know when I have a next video out. Thank you guys. Have a nice day.